Hi, I'm Janelle Deck, and this is Nancy Letts, and we're here at Workroom Tech in Tryon, North Carolina. Thrilled to share a couple of techniques today, all relating to
invisible zippers next to welt cord, and how to get a match at the bottom of the cushion after you have your zipper in.
Yes, and I just watched Nancy do this method where she puts the pull on after she's got the zipper sewn in, which is amazing, I think, because it gives you flexibility.
Yeah. Yep.
You can fix and adjust and make it so that it does match.
Right.
And I'm not used to that method. I'm going to try that method, but we have different techniques for how we actually get the zipper on next to the cord.
Right.
And we'll share the pros and cons of each one.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
What I do first is I mark in the seam allowance an inch and a half in from either end, and you do that on both pieces, and then you'll match those up later. You'll see where that comes in. Okay, and then we can put this piece aside. We're going to sew the zipper tape on to the welted side first, and you will start stitching here about the corner where the welt makes the corner, and the zipper coil is basically centered over the welt but a little to the right hand side, because you don't want too much zipper tape showing when you sew the second step. And I also usually keep this bottom piece taut, because otherwise you can have take up and the zipper tape is stiffer than the pillow. So you just kind of pull that taut and then hold that in place, and you can see that that zipper coil is a little bit to the right of center on top of the welt. And the reason I do this basting step is just so I can get my zipper tape where I want it on the pillow without having to worry about stitching close to the coil. We'll do that in the second step. The next step is transferring my 1.5 inch markings from the pillow. Before you separate that, you are going to match those marks up with your zipper tape to your other half of your pillow. And I like to pin parallel to the edge, and then I have a little space in here that I can stitch with that skinny foot and not have to remove that pin while I'm stitching. Oops, I got 2 that time. And then I just sort of pull that, make sure I'm getting a pretty much center, and you see there's a little bit of ease there, and that's because the flat piece that doesn't have the welt on it, putting the welt on, you get a tiny bit of take up, and that's why we do that side first. So now that you have your pins on, you can separate this zipper, and now you can go ahead and sew this on. And I start back here a little bit away from my mark. And just hold these taut so they match up. Okay. We're going to switch to the zipper foot so we can sew close to the coil. And I will change the stitch length to be narrower. That gives you more control, and then you get a stronger stitch. You're going to pull this zipper coil out of the way, and you want to get right next to it. And now I'm going to start stitching where my mark is. This will be your actual stitch that's holding the zipper on. And again, you just want to kind of keep things taut so you don't get a bunch of puckering, and just sew close to that coil. Now we'll sew the welted side. This one's a little trickier because you have to try to hold this out of the way, even though you have your welt there. And then you're going to be stitching. You're going to have a little bit of zipper tape showing when you're done, but you want to be stitching right here so that you're covering up the stitching from when you put your welt cord on the pillow. So you want to just stay as close to that cord as you can get. So you have to go a little slower on this side so that you don't sew over your fingers. Just keep readjusting. And then you can see there's just a little bit of tape showing, and you should be covering up that stitching. So you want to match up your pillow now, and then also, you know, make sure that your little stripes are matched up, and you can pin this in a couple places to keep it in place. And then that's going to match up down there. So your zipper tape should be even now. Cut the coil down to here. This should be a match. And get it to the right spot. I keep a separate pair of scissors for cutting zippers so I don't ruin my good ones. Cut that coil off. And then as you put the pull on, you're going to match up those marks. So put the left side on. The mark goes right about to the top of where that pull is. And you want to hear a little click as it pushes into there. Now you want to make sure these lines match up before you pull down on your pull. Okay, those should match. And then hopefully when you zip this shut, you will get a good match on your lines. So we'll see how I did. So that's pretty good. First put your needle in here, you just want to make sure that your needle is really in between your welt here and your coil, because you do not want to see any zipper coil from the front of your pillow. You can really feel that that went in really easy, so I know that I didn't hit the zipper coil. Make sure that everything's good, then you'll cut that off because you don't want all that extra zipper tape inside there, obviously. And then before you turn this completely inside out, just double check, especially at this first end, that your zipper tape's not showing here where you sewed. So that looks good. And then you want to make sure on this end that you haven't completely sewed over your welt. Nothing's showing, so that looks good. So now you could clip this off, and then you flip your cushion inside out and stuff it.
I like to pull the zipper apart first. And line up the teeth butt up to the welt cord, not rolling it open. Just lining up the teeth to that welt cord. And I'm not trying to stitch very close here. I'm just stitching. This is just to hold it in place. Just a basting stitch. Little this side, it can be the actual stitch. So we'll get nice and close. And to get closer on the second pass, and not go over the teeth, we've got the skinny foot. I'm trying just to get as close as possible. Riding the cord if you can. And that skinny foot keeps the needle from getting into the teeth, which is the end of the project. Lining up the pattern match, making a little mark, and adding a pull. There we have it. I like to work with the stitch side up. On the go around. And making sure the needle falls just to the right of the welt cord, but in front of the teeth. If you notice, I have a little taper to my corners. They're in a little bit further than the stitch on the side to prevent the dog ears. And to pattern match the side, I'm just being mindful of lining up as I go. I'm not a fan of using pins. We're both done. Yay.
Yay.
Let's talk technique.
Okay.
Okay. The first thing I noticed was in the prep of the pillow, I was sewing the welt from the top to place the welt on the one side, and you were sewing the welt from the bottom.
From the bottom.
Why do you do that?
It prevents puckering usually, depending on the fabric. Sometimes I can't do that. The other thing that I do that makes it easier when I'm sewing with the welt on the bottom is that when I'm coming around with the welt the first time, I don't stop and clip my welt. I just round that slowly, and then that way I just get a nice even curve. I don't have like a sharp corner that maybe isn't covered up when I come around the second time.
And I sewed from the top, clipped each corner in order to make that corner, and I do it the same way you do on a cushion when it's so important not to pucker.
Right.
But on a pillow, I actually don't mind a little tightness in that stitch just because it's a pillow. You know, yeah. Cushion though, that's a on a cushion it's really bad.
And I just do it the same on my pillow because I don't like to switch my method back and
methods,
forth. I
which
just do it the same every time.
Very smart. Okay. Yep. I went to the trouble of doing that back tack there, but you didn't. Why?
When I finish sewing my pillow together, I'm going past where I actually stitched the zipper, and I come back probably about 1 inch or so, and I back tack here. So the pull can never go back that far. And then I clip it just shy of the seam allowance over here so that it doesn't bulk up the corner.
Okay. The other thing we did differently, I noticed, is our cuts. I have this line and extra space, and your line is out near the edge.
Yeah.
That's just like a design choice?
That may be the fact that you use a bigger seam allowance than I do.
Oh, maybe
I have a half-inch seam allowance.
Okay,
so I think
use
my
3/4.
whole pillow actually ended up bigger.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. So my 18-inch pillows are actually smaller than 18, and they're even smaller because I cut 19, do 3/4 inch seam allowance when I'm using welt.
Okay.
And taper the corners, so they end up being smaller.
Yeah, and I have to, if my designer asks for an 18-inch pillow, I better give him an 18-inch pillow. So.
That's the way it works. Okay, and so there's an accuracy thing that difference. The other thing that I think we differed on is I tend to do a pretty dramatic tapered corner.
Yeah, and I don't do that.
That's not your standard?
Nope.
No. Okay.
Nope.
The other thing we differed on was in the stitching of the zipper itself to the welt. I think you kept your two sides of the zipper together when you placed it on the welt?
Right.
And so why did you do that rather than
it just gives me more control to hold it in place where I want it so that it's the distance it needs to be from the welt. And I do probably have a little bit more tape showing than you, but I don't like to see the stitching from the welt because I use a walking foot. I don't have multiple colors of upholstery thread. And so I really don't want that thread showing because oftentimes it's not matching.
Okay, so there's a really clear difference. If you open up the thing and place it like I did, yes, you're closer to the teeth with your stitch, but you're exposing your welt stitch.
Right.
And so that's a clear trade-off.
Personal preference.
Yep.
Which one you like. I don't like to see the stitching.
And I don't like to see the tape.
Yeah.
So, Nancy, I do like the concept of not using the pre-made zippers and putting the pull on last, so that you have control over the pattern match.
Right.
Now, you pinned and made sure things were going to line up. I didn't, and if the fabric wasn't behaving so well, I might have really had an issue that even if I got it lined up putting here, it might have been off.
This isn't a slippery fabric, so you're probably okay not to pin, but you know, sometimes you have slippery fabrics and you really need to pin.
And then it would have been good to do that. You had something to mention about the pull?
Yeah, what I do, if people don't like this big pull hanging out, if you just back it up a little bit and you just stick it in there and then push it shut, and you really can barely see it.
As we were admiring our lovely work, we thought of one more thing we should share. We both had our welt start and stop overlap on the side.
On the lower side. Yep.
And not the bottom. I know why I do it. Why do you do it?
I do it so that I don't have a seam at the bottom because it's easier to put the invisible zipper next to the welt if I don't have a big bulk of a joint right there. A big lump.
That's the same reason I do it. Yeah, so hey. Nice
High
job.
five.